Hello, boys and girls. It's story time with Miss Janet, Miss Amy, and me, Miss Rose. Remember, we started reading our special story, Kossula, Memories of Africa. Today, we're going to read the story. If you have your book, you can read along. Okay, let's get started.
All right.
So, this book was written by Roseline D. Williams. Hi, everyone. Since this is a history class, I would like to share a fascinating story with you all today. This is a story about our warriors, kings, and queens of West Africa. The title of the book is Kossula, Memories of Africa. A long time ago, deep in a mountainous village of West Africa, lived a young boy named Kossula. He lived with his father, Oluwale, and his mother, Fonlolu, along with his sisters and brothers. Kossula came from a royal and wealthy family. His father, Oluwale, was chief to the king, and his grandfather was an officer to the king. Life was good in our African village. The men in our village were great hunters and fishermen. The African land was very rich and fertile, producing a lot of vegetables such as yams, beans, and corn in abundance. The fruits were plentiful. We grew pineapples, bananas, coconuts, and melons. We raised domestic animals such as hogs, goats, sheep, and chickens. The people worked together and we traded our food and goods with the surrounding villages. The land was so plentiful that no one was ever hungry. Everyone in the village had their own land and their own home. The village was surrounded by two protective walls with several gates within the walls for security. If our village was ever invaded, we had several gates to escape into the forests. The king of our village was King Akian. He came from a royal line of kings. He was a very tall and peaceful man, but very strict. He loved and protected his people. The ruler of our village was Chief Owini. He was a tall and very powerful man. He had authority over all the elders in the village. At the age of 14, I had to be trained as a warrior and as a hunter. My older brothers were already in the army. I trained with my best friends, Poli, Osa, Kili, and Oluale. Just before sunrise, our fathers and the elders in the village led us outside of the village to a campsite. First, we trained on how to make bows and arrows and how to shoot. Then we were trained on how to use our spears. Our tribe was peaceful. We only trained in self-defense to protect ourselves and our people from any outside invaders.
It was then time to learn how to hunt. The training would take up to 14 days. After the training was completed, we became warriors in the army. A huge celebration was held back in the village to mark our journey into manhood. As we got closer to the village, we felt the trees vibrating from the sounds of the beating drums in the village. A few years later, the king of Dahomey, Glile, came to our village to trade. King Glile was a very tall and heavy man. He had conquered most of the surrounding villages. He demanded that King Achion gave him a large portion of our crops, but King Achion refused his demands. King Glile was very angry, so his army immediately left our village. Later that night, back in Dahomey, King Glile was still very upset. He prepared his army and his Amazon warrior for battle. The Amazon warriors were also known as Nomiton and Mino, meaning our mothers, by the male army of Dahomey. They were an all-female, well-trained military group. They were also the king's bodyguards. The king was proud of his army and his Amazon warriors. They have conquered many of the surrounding villages. They even conquered the French army several times. King Glile and his family set out for war. They marched all night through the forest, and just before sunrise, they reached our village. Still dark. At this time, most of the men were out hunting or working in the fields. The women and the children were still asleep. The invading army surrounded the village. Standing at each gate, they began to break down the great walls and the gates with their weapons.
Meanwhile, I was in my bed asleep. Suddenly, I was wakened by a loud noise, screams and cries. I grabbed my weapon and ran outside of my home, only to find out that my village was being overrun by the warriors of Dahomey. There was no escape. People were desperately running in all directions. I tried to escape into the forest, but I was captured by one of the Amazon warriors. Walls and my village were completely destroyed. I was taken captive, along with some of my people just outside of the village. King Achion and Chief Winnie were also captured. Most of my most of us marched through the forest and took into Wada near the coast where we were kept in the barracoon for 21 days. Our group was then sold to an American captain, and he marched us to the shore. Then, through the door of no return, we were forced uh, to board his huge ship called the Clotilda. We crossed the Atlantic Ocean, never to see our homeland and our people again. We reached the shoreland of Mobile, Alabama in 1860. Most of us were split up and sold to several Alabama plantation owners. American Civil War and the E- Emancipation Proclamation, we were free and we were left to survive on our own. And we tried but failed to return to our beloved homeland, Africa. Since we were not able to return, many of us reunite from various plantations alongside American-born from formerly enslaved men, women, and children. Having our own land was important to us. We decided to buy our own land and build our own community in the image of our own land, Africa, and we call it Africa Town. We then chose our leaders, judges, to govern our own people.
Juliet then raised her hand and asked, "Do they have their own doctor in their town?" Mr. Clark answered, "Yes. When they were sick, they were treated by their own African doctor. Tristan raised his hand and asked, "Did they live in their own houses?" Mr. Clark answered, "Yes, the men worked as masons and carpenters, building their own homes for their families." "What kind of food did they eat?" asked Tristan. Mr. Clark answered, "The hunting and fishing were plentiful in the Alabama forest. They used their own hunting skills they learned in Africa and planted their own vegetable garden." Several of the children were so fascinated. They said in unison, "Wow!" Al said, "I would love to visit this place."
Brooklyn raised her hand and asked, did they teach their children about Africa and teach them their African language? Mr. Clark answered, yes, they spoke their own African language and taught their children the African costumes, tribal traditions, and told them of their African ancestors and on how important it is to know about their heritage and about their African homeland. The people of Africa Town are proud of their rich African heritage. The spirit of the African Town's ancestors still lives on today in the descendants of the people of Africa Town located in Mobile, Alabama.
Camilla asked, did they have a school like ours? And Vanessa said, yes, like ours? Mr. Clark answered, yes, education was very important to them. They built their own school and it's still there in Africa Town today. Then Brilliant asked, what else did they have in their town? Mr. Clark answered, well, they had their own grocery store, movie theater, gas station, barber shop, motel, church, post office, and dry cleaner. The people in Africa Town formed their own community.
Okay, boys and girls, this is the end of our story, but it's not the end of our book because next week we are going to be creating our own family tree. And you're going to be doing the same thing too. You know, just like Kossula did. Kossula had his mom, his dad, his brother, and his sisters. What about you? Do you have brothers and sisters? Do you have a mom and a dad? Do you have uncles, grandpa? Do you have aunties? Who are the people in your family? And who are some of your ancestors that maybe you never even got to see them, but maybe your mommy and daddy can tell you about them. So we're going to make our family tree. And on that tree, you're going to draw a tree just like this one that you see right here. And you're going to maybe draw some squares or rectangles, triangles, whatever shape you want to draw on there. And then you're going to put the names of your family members. All the ones that you know, and maybe all the ones that you wish you knew. You can ask your mommy and your daddy, and you can put that on there because we're going to be showing you ours, and you're going to be showing us yours as well. And hopefully we can all have, maybe some of you are going to have more family members than me, or I'm going to have more family members than you. I don't know, but we'll count and we'll find out. And then another thing we're going to do is there was a lot of words in that story that sometimes was hard to say. And it was hard for me too. It was hard for Miss Roseline. It was hard for Miss Amy. Some words. So we're also going to talk about those words and what do they mean? Like you heard us say plantation. What is a plantation? You heard us say emancipation of proclamation. What is that? So we're going to be talking about that next week. And we're going to all talk about what does those words mean. Okay, so come back. We're going to have our novel words and we're going to make our family tree. And for today, this is the end of our story. So we want to say bye-bye. Have a good week and hope to see you next week. Let's sing our goodbye song like we do all the time. Are you ready? Okay, get those hands out. Goodbye, everybody. Goodbye. Clap it out. Goodbye, everybody. Goodbye. We've played and we've played and we've had a great day. Goodbye, everybody. Goodbye. Goodbye. See you next time.
Bye.